Greetings, y'all. Welcome back to the garden. It's the second week of May here in North Florida, and we finally got some much needed rain last night, and the plants are already perking back to life. But before we take a tour of the yard, I figure it'd be a good time of year to go over some pepper plant basics. I've got a whole patch of pepper plants out front that we can go take a look at, and we have them in all different stages of growth, from basically seedling all the way up to mature plant with some fruit on it that we can harvest if we like. So join me in this episode. We'll go over some pepper plant pro tips, say that 10 times fast, and then we'll do a little tour of the yard and check on our white potatoes, our sweet potatoes, our tomatoes, and all kind of other things that are really doing well now that we've got our nice warm weather, our nice long days, and like I said, finally some good rain. So join me in this episode. We'll talk peppers and then do a little tour of the yard and have some fun. Alrighty, y'all, we'll make our way out front here to the pepper patch. And as we go, we'll do a little bit of terminology review. Now, depending on where you live in the world, you'll hear peppers go by many different names. Here in the Western Hemisphere, you'll usually hear either the term pepper in the Northern Hemisphere or chile if you're in South America or in the Southern Hemisphere. But if you're in Europe or Australia or New Zealand, you'll usually hear the term capsicum used, which is just the Latin name, right? And this is also where the active ingredient capsaicin gets its name. And that's the active ingredient that makes it hot and spicy and is used in pepper spray and things like that. So you'll hear these three names sort of used interchangeably: chili, pepper, and capsicum, but they're all effectively the same plant. And there's basically 5 major species of chilies that all originate in the New World, and they can be crossed fairly well within each species type, but then have trouble jumping from species to species. It can be done, but that's a whole nother can of worms of plant genetics and pepper genetics in particular, and there's guys out there that do that for a living, so I'll leave that to them. But suffice it to say, a pepper is a capsicum and is also a chili. You'll hear all of these terms sort of used interchangeably, and it mostly just depends on where you are in the world, but they're all the same plant and they all effectively have the same basic properties. Here's a look at just a basic little sweet red pepper that you might find at a grocery store, but it's indicative of how most peppers are formed, right? They'll have a stem that attaches to the main plant. This was where the flower was initially that became pollinated. Then the fruit forms off the base of that flower, and it can assume any number of shapes, right? From little small Scotch bonnet things to very long skinny peppers. But once we cut them open, you'll see that they all have the same basic structure. Inside the pepper plant, there are, of course, some seeds, and these seeds are often perfectly viable. We could take these seeds right now, let them dry out for a day or two, plant them, and they would surely sprout. So most peppers have relatively sweet flesh, but the heat is actually within these white veins in the seeds. So oftentimes, if you can remove the white vein, cut it out with a knife, you can vastly reduce the heat of a pepper. You may not get rid of all of the heat, but you can get rid of a lot of it by simply taking out the seeds and removing that white vein that's found inside. And then after that, the flesh you can then chop up and do whatever you like with it. But all peppers will have this same basic anatomy to them. Alrighty, y'all, here's a good example of a pepper plant that's still basically in the seedling stage. You can see it emerged from the ground, and it started putting out a few little sets of leaves. And as they came on, I would essentially start to break them off as they emerged from the plant. And I did this for 2 reasons. One is to kind of encourage the plant to grow upwards more, and the other is to remove these lower leaves from any potential contact with the ground. The closer the leaves are to the ground, the easier it is for bugs and disease and things like that to sort of jump up onto the plant, so to speak. So by giving yourself a few inches between the first set of leaves and the actual surface of the soil can really be beneficial to kind of keeping the critters and the cooties off of the plant, while also, again, kind of encouraging it to grow upwards. And most pepper plants will put out maybe, half a dozen to a dozen pair of these opposite leaves before it eventually takes on this shape, where you'll see that the pepper plant will naturally form a Y. It will naturally split and form a V all on its own. You don't have to pinch it, you don't have to top it or do anything like that. And once it's achieved this V state, this Y state, you'll notice it starts to put on flowers. And once it puts on flowers, of course, it can then start to make fruit, right? And this is the telltale sign that your pepper plant is reaching maturity, when it starts to naturally fork and form this V or this Y shape. And at that point, you can go through and strip all of the bottom leaves, as you can see here. Some people will wait for the plant to form this natural split, start fruiting, and then in one fell swoop go in and peel off all of the lower leaves from the stem. I tend to do it sort of as I go along the way, like I said, just so the bugs and things can't crawl up. But either way will work. The idea is that once they've hit this V point, regardless, you would like to strip off those lower leaves, again, to make it more difficult for pests and also to focus all of that energy upwards into the new growth and into the fruit. But once you see your pepper plant do that VY fork split, that's the telltale sign that it's mature, and it should start putting out flowers that can then get pollinated and then become our peppers. Alright, y'all, let's do a little quick garden tour. We've actually got lots of fun updates, so let's go take a look. All right, of course, as we come in here, we got the good old gardenia bush, which is actually starting to make lots of really cool little buds all over it. A few in the back are actually blooming already. I'll show you those in a second. And we got the Confederate jasmine, which is going crazy. I wish y'all could smell it. It smells like the sweetest perfume you can imagine. The banana trees have gone ballistic, especially since we got that rain last night. Hydrangea's doing well, elephant ear, camellia looking great. Here's the good old wisteria, which was in bloom earlier this year and is now just turned into its nice little jungle tunnel, which we like. Coming through the gate here. Just some ferns and grass growing in. I've got my thornless blackberry bush, which is actually starting to put on a little bit of fruit. This little guy has been struggling for a couple years, but it looks like it's finally turned the corner and is looking really lush and happy. So hopefully we'll get some good stuff off of that. I've got a little moringa I just put in the ground yesterday after coming out of this little 4-inch pot, and then it got some good rain, so that's nice. It'll grow like a rocket. These things are incredible. Here's a little ice cream banana plant. I got a little 4-pack of those I planted throughout the yard, and they're all doing well. Here's a mulberry transplant that you can see has lots of nice fresh new growth, and hopefully between the banana plant and the mulberry they'll kind of block all this blazing sun here. And then as we make our way over here to the trash can taters, I'll post a link to that up in the corner here. You can see they've now kind of turned the corner, and this is how white potatoes let you know they're done. They will just naturally kind of turn yellow, wither, and die. And that's their way of letting you know that it's time to harvest. So I'll let them kind of finish doing their thing, and next week we'll dump out the bucket and harvest our white potatoes and see how we did. This was a new method, doing them in a container while also using a lasagna method, using soil and, of course, good old mulch, right? So we'll dump it out next week, see how we did, see if I actually knew what I was doing or if I looked like a fool. Either way, y'all can make fun of me in the comments. Here's another one of those little ice cream banana trees, but something's been munching on it. But you can see, in true Monty Python fashion, he's not dead yet. We've got lots of little bush beans coming along with beautiful new growth, and I've been just picking beans off them as they've been coming and eating them, both to encourage a little bit more vertical growth and just because they're tasty. We've just got some cool papyrus, and we've got some cool canna lilies over here coming in. I guess we'll go to the sweet potatoes next. Here's a Turk's cap hibiscus that has just exploded since the rain. Here's my messy potting bench. Again, feel free to ridicule. Here's a nice 6-foot, or geez, probably 7-foot tall monstera now. Coming out this way, got the ligustrum tunnel here, going straight to the back corner of the yard. Sorry about the pool noise, that's my neighbors there. Here's my field of awapui ginger, which was in the last video. I mentioned that with the sweet potato slips planting, and you can see it's probably grown a foot. Here's a little mulberry I recently transplanted. And here are those sweet potato slips from last week's video. I'll post a link to it up in the corner. Here's our whole potato, which has probably grown an inch. Here are our slips, which are just growing like rockets. These all had really highly developed roots on them. And then these two little slips at the end were just slightly less developed, a little bit less roots than these ones in the middle. But you can see they're all doing well. They love that rain. And you can see that all of this awapui quote-unquote shampoo ginger is doing great. So now the sweet potatoes can just run out into that field and they'll be happy. And you can also see some of these volunteer sunflowers that have been coming up from my bird seed, and I just let them go. The bees love them and they look cool, so anytime I see these in the yard I just leave them be. And as we go over here, we got our passion flower that's probably, gosh, doubled in size since I put it in the ground a week or two ago. It's doing great. Soon it'll be able to get up on the fence and get supported by that. As we come through the yard here, more of these wild birdseed sunflowers. You can see some have multiple heads, some just kind of make one giant head. Mexican sunflowers are going ballistic as well. They won't flower till the late fall. We've got some more bush beans, which as you can see are just flowering like crazy. And as soon as they make a flower, of course, they'll then make a bean. And you can pick them at any stage and eat them raw, cook them, do whatever you like. Again, lots of nice, pretty new green growth on those beans. Here's a Mexican sunflower that's almost 6 foot tall already. I don't know what this guy's called, but it makes real sweet smelling little white flowers. This is what's called pokeweed. And people used to eat in the old timey days. It's mildly toxic, but if you cook it enough, you can eat it. But I think it just kind of looks cool, and it has nice, cool shaped leaves on it, and the birds love it, so I'll leave it there for them. Here's a muscadine, which I've been pruning and struggled to get through the winter, but it is now kind of exploding back to life, so that's great. As we make our way over here, this is some recently transplanted wisteria to kind of gut up over this little gate trellis here. Same with this one. Another ice cream banana doing well. Here's one of many tomato patches, and as you can see, I've been stripping the leaves and really aiming them towards that fence. And once they get on the fence, they'll just grow up and take off like a rocket. Here's some more elephant ear. Here's a real pretty sunflower, again with multiple heads on it, going ballistic. Here's a magnolia. Here's some 5 o'clocks. Another wisteria. Here's some corn that sprouted from the bird seed, which I'm also just letting grow. I think that'll be fun. I've never actually grown corn before, so we'll just let it do its thing. Here's some more tomato plants, which you can see I've directed towards the fence and up, and they're now going crazy. More beans. And look at this, y'all. Here's a wild volunteer tomato that made it just on the other side of the fence. And of course, wouldn't you know it, it's doing better than all of them. And it's already got tomatoes on it. So hopefully by next week, we'll be able to harvest this one. You can see we've got another gigantic sunflower starting to form and some more wild volunteer tomatoes. So that's really cool. And again, you'll notice the sunflower patch, all from bird seed. So bird seed is kind of cool. Not only do you get the birds, but you get some free flowers, all different types. Okay, and as we go through here, we've got some angel trumpet trees, we've got some papyrus, some elephant ear, crepe myrtle, of course another sunflower. That's a plum tree that's doing great. Meyer lemon tree. I'm gonna have to trim off this other trunk here, I think, and let this be the main one and just kind of go from there. But it actually survived our snowstorm this winter, and it's doing great. Another super huge, awesome sunflower. Another angel trumpet that's struggling. Here's a gardenia in full bloom, and I wish y'all could smell it, guys. It's just incredible. And here's a beautiful one that hasn't quite opened yet, and this will get as big as the bush out front. Here's another wild corn, watermelon patch going crazy. Here's a pepper plant, and as we mentioned before, it's now reached that point where it's naturally forking and making that Y V shape. So it will now start making flowers that can then turn into peppers, and we can strip all of the leaves below that natural V point. Here's a blueberry bush that the birds beat me to. They got all the berries this year, but that's fine. Another big old sunflower looking cool. Here's an apple tree that was struggling but is now finally coming to life. Again, more pepper plants. You'll notice this one has not quite forked yet, so it's got a ways to go. And what else we got here? Another example of this giant pokeweed, which is essentially a small tub in this rain. And then we'll make our way back out to the front here. As you can see, we're on quite a steep little hill here, and I had to put down lots of mulch to keep that eroding, and it seems to be doing the trick. Lots of things have just volunteered and come up in that mulch, and I'm just letting them do it to kind of help hold that hillside intact. And I'd rather have some green than none at all. And as we come through here, of course on this side, here's our big, huge banana patch that I did my banana transplant and separation video on. I'll put a link to that, and you can see it's probably quadrupled in size just since that video. We've got some lemongrass. Watermelon here are all finally starting to hit their stride and go ballistic, so that'll be fun. Last year I got dozens and dozens of watermelon out of this patch. Here's a good old mulberry tree. More watermelons, all looking good. We'll come back around this way. Here's the tomato patch, and there's all different varieties in here. You can see some are just going ballistic. They'd probably be up over my knee if they weren't trained into that cage, while others are still small, but they're healthy. And if you saw a previous video where I first put these in the ground, these look 10 times better than they did. So I'm confident they'll turn the corner and come around here. And you can see we've got all different varieties and all kind of different stages of growth. There's the banana we transplanted from the patch here over to there, and he's doing great. We've got some Fakahatchee grass that's flowering and going to go to seed. Our pineapple plants They're all shooting out new pups and they look real happy. Elephant ears are big. Blueberry bush has lots of fruit on it. The birds haven't discovered it yet, so I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed. This is like my little wildflower patch here. I just got all kind of different flowering butterfly type plants, and you can see some have been transplanted, others are just seeds that are emerging from the ground. And this is just a real pretty little Chinese lantern plant. But I've also been throwing birdseed in here to just let that sprout and do whatever it wants to do. And here's a mulberry from a previous episode, and look at it, y'all. It is just fruiting like crazy. They're just all over the place. Yummy. This is just another little flower patch. We got some delphinium, some ornamentals, echinacea, another poor old Meyer lemon tree that I've had for years and has just never managed to get off the ground, but we got faith in it. We think it's going to do better this year. And then finally, coming back around here, we got another banana tree, which is probably double or tripled in size since we moved it. Good old hydrangea, good old wisteria, more Mexican sunflower, tomato plants really starting to crawl up that trellis. And then we're just kind of right back to where we started. Alrighty, y'all, thank you for joining me in this episode. We had lots of fun stuff to cover, covering peppers and an update in the yard. So hopefully this time next week we'll be able to harvest some tomatoes, some potatoes, and even some of the peppers we covered today. So join me next week and we'll see you next time. Cheers and chews.